At this time to introduce to you the two inductors, Mr. Travis Funk, current Hall of Famer, and we'll come back to the podium, Mr. Wolfman, Jason Sanderson.
I turn around, see Ox Baker there with black electrical tape wrapped around his nose. That distracted me. I lost the match. But it's okay. We're still good friends, right? Ox, you've been a good friend. You've been at my house. You've been in my pool. You've been aggravating me since you've been in my house. People wake up to an alarm clock. I'm waking up to an ox in my swimming pool. Oh, wakes up the whole neighborhood. Now my neighbor's knocking at my door. Who's screaming in your pool? Some loudmouth. I don't know who he is. But it was good old Ox. Hey, it's my pleasure to be here. I'm not going to say too many words. It's been a long night. I would like to congratulate you, induct you to the 2009 New England Pro Wrestling Hall of Fame, and I love you.
Travis and I were talking earlier, and we both were saying, okay, now how are we going to do this? How are we going to put Ox over? I said, well, I'm not going to be talking too long because, let's face it, nobody can tell the story of Ox Baker quite like Ox Baker. However, because this is going to be on tape, I did feel I needed to do something a little formal for my friend here. So, here goes, a short synopsis of Ox Baker. The legendary Ox Baker began his wrestling career in the late 1960s in Kansas City. He was noticed by the promoters, and after seeing him work, was put under the tutelage of men like Bob Geigel and Pat O'Connor. Eventually, his career spread across the Midwest and into Canada and Puerto Rico. The booking sheets read like a who's who of professional wrestling. Carlos Colon, Ole Anderson, the Von Erichs, Big John Studd, and on and on. In Florida, he was teamed with the legendary superstar Billy Graham to win the Florida Tag Team titles. His size, as well as his distinctive looks and voice, combined to make him the perfect package for a heel wrestler. There was no mistaking the menace of his steely ways, and many of the younger fans watching him on Saturday mornings could easily see him as the perfect challenge to whatever champion was reigning at that time. Indeed, if anyone has ever watched the Disney movie Mulan and seen the villain in that story, it's not a big stretch to think that at some point the cartoonist must have seen Ox Baker in action. And they wouldn't be the only one, as anyone who has ever watched Escape from New York could also realize. Ox, you're a wonderful man. I've had the pleasure of knowing him for many years and even having worked for me on shows. I remember it well, and occasionally even fondly, because when he works for you, he always livened up the show if you were on it. However, his talents are not limited to acting and wrestling. He possesses a deep singing voice and has published cookbooks with recipes in honor of our brothers and sisters in this business that have passed away. Now, I realize that my little speech has not been long. However, Ox Baker makes me remember a proverb from back in my home state of Vermont. Ox, you're a lot like a Morgan horse. Difficult to describe, but easy to recognize. And it is my honor and pleasure to be up here with Travis and induct Mr. Ox Baker into the Pro Wrestling Hall of Fame.
Well, as many of you know, Ox Baker was never the greatest wrestler of all times. But he was blessed with the greatest speaking voice in the history of wrestling. Whenever a promoter wanted a great interview, he would ask Ox Baker. Some of the guys that hated me in the business say, Ox, would you talk to me? I don't know what to say. So as I was listening tonight, the very first person come up here talked about an old friend of mine that had died and passed away. Well, a few years ago, my first wife had passed away, and I met my second wife, Peggy Ann, here. And for months, I was telling her about, I went all over the world, New Zealand, Australia, and the rustlers always picked me to do the cooking for them. The stews, the chili, whatever it had to be done. And one day she got so tired and she said, Ox, why don't you write it down? I'm tired of you talking about Andre the Giant won 3 pounds of this here. The boys in Texas won 30 pounds of barbecued ribs. On and on she went. So finally I sat down, and in 3 years I wrote a 50 gentlemen that I had wrestled, 50 gentlemen that had passed away. And even today when I mentioned them to you, you probably wouldn't even recognize their names. I thought that actually my career was over, but it wasn't. Because the other day I just wrote, I'm starting to write another cookbook of 64 more people that had died and passed away. A little while ago someone said they started in 1967. Ox Baker started in 1962. There were no training schools in them days. Nobody showed you how to wrestle. You had to get in the ring, and after he was tearing the ring down at night, you'd ask one of the wrestlers to show you a hold, and in them days, they would potato you as they showed it to you. But I loved it so much, and a lot of guys would say, Ox, why would you wrestle for $11 or $12? I said, because I love the business so much. I don't care what they do. I don't care if they do pay me. I want to get in there, and I want to interview. And I can tell you all about my great matches, but that would only take about 15 seconds. But what I want to talk about is the people that I met over the years, and we've all heard adages like, if you have one friend in life, you're blessed. Well, Ox Baker has more than one friend in life. I came up after my first wife had died. I was starting all over with my wife, Peggy Ann, and lo and behold, I got a call and said, Ox, would you manage someone up here? And I said, yeah, who is it? Just get up there. And I went up there and I managed, and I was so pleased. I was doing something. I was back into wrestling. And I thanked the guy that night. He said, Ox, we have a show next week. I'll be there. And you know what? I never even asked what I was going to get paid. I just said I'd be there. And then, like Reverend Sanderson, he called me up and said, Ox, we'd like you to come up and manage up here. I said, well, how long do you need me? He said, Ox, as long as you want to come up, that's how long we'll use you. I said, thank you. And I slowly looked around and I said, you know, I've got a couple friends. I got more than one friend. I got 2 or 3 friends, you know. I went to a movie, Mike run a movie place. I said, can I have a couple of movies? He said, yes, Ox. And he said, Ox, what do you do? I said, I'm a wrestler. Well, I'm a wrestling fan. He said, and Mike became my friend. His wife became my friend. And slowly but surely, I realized I had a bunch of people that not only talked to me, they actually liked me. 2 years ago, I got an offer to go down to Florida, and Funk said, Ox, do you like to swim? And I said, yeah, I have a swimming pool. I said, I'll be down on the next plane. I went down there, and when I tell you that I fell in love with his whole family, I did. Him, his wife, his children, and we talked, and they became my friend. And I realized that friends are so important. And as I still continue through life, when I wrote these stories of 62 people, I said to myself, you know, a lot of people complain when they get old. As I stand in front of you right here, I'm 75 years old. And the reason that the good Lord has given me this time, they want me to write these stories about these guys. that have died and passed on so the fans won't forget them. And I gotta tell you something happened just a year and a half ago. I had the very last match with Killer Kowalski. At 72 and in 83, we were the oldest men to ever win a tag team tournament. So movie producers came around to me and said, we'd like to do a movie about that. I said, fine. Killer said, fine. And I have to tell you, this is a funny story here. Killer, we got in and out of the ring 3 or 4 times, and the last time he said, Ox, thanks for helping me in and out of the ring. I said, Killer, I had to help you. I was afraid you were going to fall on me if I didn't. But I got a call in the middle of the night. And now this is a sad story. They said Killer had died. So me and my wife, we made up a big jar, a collection. I bought a couple hundred pictures. I went to 2 or 3 shows. I tried to take a collection up, not for myself, but for Killer's wife. I had the pictures there. I had the jar there. I come home the first night. She said, how much did you collect, Ox? I said, nothing. A week later, I went to another show. How much did you collect? Nothing. I was amazed. I went to the 3rd show. I grabbed some guy, like I grabbed somebody, and said, hey! Why didn't you put something in the jar and take a picture of Killer Kowalski? It's free. He said, I don't know who Killer Kowalski is. So I know I'm doing the right thing when I write about these old stars, when I write about Dick the Bruiser, Bobo Brazil, Wilbur Snyder, the Von Erichs. You might not know any of their names. I wrestled Andre 28 times, folks. You know, in a few years, people are going to forget Andre the Giant, but I'm not going to let them forget Andre the Giant. Because I'm writing my other book. I wrote one story about him with the 3 pounds of salmon patty. I'm going to write another story about Andre the Giant. You know, a great friend of mine, Gary Hart, a fantastic manager. I loved him like a brother also. He passed away last year. I had to write a story on him. The Spoiler, the greatest masked man in the history of wrestling, as far as I'm concerned, because he went everywhere. He died last year also. 3 years ago, my wife and me went out to Las Vegas, and I was so happy. Bob Orton Sr. had put me up in his house a couple of times to save me some money. We bought his last meal there the last night that they had the cauliflower alley. I was so happy. He ate more than I did. But 6 weeks later, I got a call, and Bob Orton Sr. was dead. Now, maybe you don't even know Bob Orton Sr., but my books that I'm writing, he's in them books, the story. Because unbelievably, I have a mind that's unbelievable. I'm not only setting a world record with the Rubik's Cube, folks, I'm doing it without looking at the cube itself. All these conversations I had with these guys over 46 years, I remember them just like we were talking yesterday. You know, when I woke up in the dressing room after Lou Thesz had knocked me out in 46 seconds, the promoter said, you dummy, why did you call him an old man? I said, I was only ribbing. Thesz came up and said, I knew he was kidding. I said, what'd you knock me out for then? He said, big boy, in this business you gotta learn like everybody else does. Now that was over 40 years ago, that conversation in the dressing room. I've never forgot every word of it. All these other wrestlers, I had conversations. I remember them as I sat down. My wife would tell you, I bugged her to death. Stop, tell her, write it down, she said. And I write it, I'm gonna keep on writing. And like the movie business, after I didn't get it with Killer, I wrote one of my own, and a guy, we did a movie in Philadelphia. Right now I'm working on 3 or 4 more, and I keep myself busy. I'm not thinking about how old what the next project is. And I have an adage that I've used for years and years and years, and I wish you'd let me do it for you tonight. It was, I'm going to be nice and sweet to all the people I meet as I go through life ladder of renown. Because them same folks that I meet on my way up, I've got to talk to them on my way down. Thank you very much.